Okay. We are live, everybody, to discuss Brexit. I think we are live. YouTube says we're live. What do people in the chat say? Can you guys see me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we're live.
Let me know in the chat. We are
Okay.
live. Peter says we're live.
We are live.
Alexander in London looks all ready to go so he can give his Brexit tour de force. This is your Sergeant Pepper's.
Oh my gosh.
Alexander.
I don't know if you know, Alexander, you're doing it on Crosstalk on Tuesday.
Oh,
also.
I do know. What I would say is I think the Beatles enjoy doing Sergeant Pepper. I have to say, I'm not sure whether I enjoy so much doing Brexit, but there we go.
All right. So, guys, if you could hear me, if you heard Peter, if you heard Alexander, if you could see us, let us know. It's good to have you here on this Friday afternoon for us, early afternoon for Alexander in London, a little later for me and Peter. And wherever you are in the world, morning, afternoon, or evening, or even middle of the night, thank you for joining us. So let's see, before we get rolling, hit that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. We really appreciate it when you share the channel, especially outside of YouTube. That helps our channel get exposure. You can also find us on BitChute. I never say that. I always forget to say that on many of the lives, but we do have a channel on BitChute that is doing really well. So you can check us out on BitChute as well. And what else? You can donate to us, PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. You'll find links in the description. And of course, the Duran shop. You can pick up some great merchandise, magic mugs, magic shirts, and all kinds of great things. And let's get rolling. Let's see where people are joining us from. I'm sure we have a lot of people in the UK who are tuning in to hear our opinions on what's going on in Brexit now that we have a deal and it's all done and over, so we can all move on with our lives.
Not so fast, Alex.
Not so fast. All right, we have Pam from Rileyville, VA, Virginia. Hey, Pam. Hey, Barbara from Spain. Let's see where else. From Milwaukee, Wisconsin, New York City. Good day from Niburu, from the Netherlands, from the UK, from West Yorkshire, UK. Where else are people joining us from? From Serbia. How's everyone doing in Serbia today? From Cape Town, from Stroud in the UK, Scotland, London, Texas. Awesome. How you doing, Jonathan? From Holland. How's everyone doing in Holland? Let's see where else. Argentina. Thank you for joining us from Argentina. Wow, awesome. From Tennessee, from Scotland as well. Sunny Wales, Norway, Macau, London, Canada. Hello from the colonies, Canada. Hello, Andre. How are you? Croatia, Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, I love Atlanta. From Norway, East Thailand. All right, let's see, Cambridgeshire, UK. From France, California, Sacramento. Been to Sacramento many times. Peter, you've been to Sacramento, haven't you?
Well, I went to UC Davis. It's right outside. Right outside. Like 25 minutes outside, yeah.
All right, from Sussex, Cambridge, UK. Hello from China. All right, how you guys doing in China? Belgium, from the moon. All right. Glad to have people from the moon joining us. All right.
Oh, it must be that Chinese probe. Okay.
That's right. Hello, Zoran from Russia. How are you in Russia? Let's see. Sweden, Norway, Finland. Okay, hand over Portugal. Hello from Mars. I'm getting further and further out. Hello from Jerusalem, from San Francisco. Let's see. From Israel. Hello, Johan. How are you? From Shrewsbury, Darwin's birthplace. Oh, very interesting. Hello to Ireland. Did a video on Ireland. Hello from Dublin, from Iceland, Netherlands. All right, let's get rolling. Let's talk a lot about Brexit. But before we get to Brexit, and before we get to the man who is in the heart of the Brexit debate, let's shoot over to Moscow, where there is no such thing as Brexit in Moscow. Russia is whole and in the Russian Federation. It's not going anywhere.
Not going anywhere.
All right. We have Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. How are you doing today, Peter?
Extremely well. It's a nice Friday afternoon. It's a free day for me. And we were discussing on What's Up earlier that, we could do a live video because I so enjoy doing them. And then the issue of Brexit came up, and then I just basically said a Hail Mary. I said, well, I'll be there for moral support from Alex Harris. And I have some kind of perspective from Europe looking at what's going on here. I'd be really honest with our viewers. I mean, over the last few weeks has gotten so complex, and I'm not an expert in British politics, okay? And that's why we have Alexander McCurris, and I know he's very much in demand. So you'll be hearing a lot from him in this podcast.
I hear a lot of the ticking of the clock. You have a clock, a watch to show us, Peter? Yeah,
it's my newest acquisition here. I didn't know. Everybody tells me it's really loud. Okay, yeah. This is from. Let's see if I get it in the camera. All right. This is a 1799 doctor's watch. Check out the crystal on there. Isn't that really cool?
Is it English?
Yeah, of course it is. Okay. Oh, and I'll do a favor to my friends in the UK. They're called Roman Dial, romandial.org or .com, I'm not sure. And they resell primarily pocket watches and primarily English pocket watches. Sometimes they'll throw in a French one or American one. But this is one of the oldest ones I've ever sold. And I saw one about a year ago, thought about it, and it was sold. There's only one. They only have one of a kinds, and so I bought this one, and I was informed that it was on the market for 12 long minutes before I picked it up. It was some kind of record for them, so I didn't want to let it pass. Yes, folks, it's very expensive, but it's very, very nice. So,
and what was the company that you got it from again, Peter?
It's called.
Give the plug.
Roman Dial, one word, .com or .org. I don't remember here. Well, maybe I can just check it real quick here. Let's see here. But .com.
Okay, great.
Beautiful pieces. Very beautiful pieces.
Okay, great. And I'll give my plug if Ernesto's watching. He has a St. George site that he wanted me to plug, which is a cool site. It's the orderofstgeorge.org. So check that out as well. Ernesto, if you're watching, you could place the link in the chat for people interested. And let's go to London, where we have the Oracle of London, who's also a very saintly man. We have Alexander McCurris. Alexander, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, enjoying looking at Peter's watch, by the way. The English, for everyone to know, used to be the great people for watches before the Swiss came along. And we have some good watchmakers in England still. I mean, Roger Smith makes bespoke watches, and they cost phenomenal sums of money, but they're beautiful things. I've actually seen a person wear one, and they're quite.
Well, while we're on it, before we go into the dreariness of Brexit here, I think a lot of people should know is that today we think of a Swiss watch as being the hallmark of horology, but in fact, the origins of Swiss watchmaking was to make spare parts for British and French producers. And it was the Swiss that actually was ripping off intellectual property. They stole the designs and made their own. Okay. And now, people look at the Chinese ripping off the Swiss. So it's, it has a continuum here. But in the early days, in the early days of beautiful pocket watchmaking, it was English and French, primarily English watches were the hallmark of watchmaking in the world. Okay. And it's really great that the romandial.com, that people that find them or inherit them, they don't really know what to do with them, and they don't know what they are. And they take it to these experts, and they clean them out, oil them, and they sell them. And if you check the website, they're remarkably well priced. Okay, I mean, you can get yourself a beautiful vintage English silver pocket watch at a very affordable price, maybe for a husband, a brother, a son. It's really cool.
Awesome. All right, great. Let's get moving since we're talking about watches and time.
Yep.
Alexander, is it time's up for the UK? Are they finally out?
Oh no, we're far from that point yet. And I think a few things to explain very briefly. I think it is now extremely unlikely we're going to see a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October. It's not impossible, but it is unlikely. And I think that a suspicion which I've developed for some time, which is that this was not Boris Johnson's agenda, I think that has crystallized. If you remember, we did programs a few weeks ago, and I was saying that I was really surprised back in September when the House of Commons was passing things like the Ben Letwin law, that he was not really fighting. He was not really fighting these laws, this law. And I thought the reason he wasn't fighting this law is because he wanted clearly to do a deal. And the deal he's come back with is a deal which is, and it needs to be said this, it is different from Theresa May's deal, more different than I had expected it would be. I mean, it reduces significantly Britain's connection with the economic agencies of the EU. It doesn't sever them completely, but we are no longer in a situation such as we were with Theresa May, when the British were essentially remaining inside the customs union and were having to harmonise all their various arrangements with those of the EU. And the reason he's been able to agree that is because he's agreed, in effect, to sever the link, or at least to weaken the link very significantly between Britain, the rest of Britain, and Northern Ireland. Because what he has basically agreed is an arrangement whereby Northern Ireland will remain within the EU's regulatory structure. So we will now have, instead of a border, a hard border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, we will start to see more of a border through the Irish Sea between the whole island of Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. That is a radical change.
Can I ask a question? I mean, what does that mean for Northern Ireland? I mean, if you displace them from the economy of the UK, then you're basically letting them go.
That is exactly what you're doing, and that is we're now going to get to the politics of this. This is a radical change. It means that, in effect, the Conservative Party, which Boris Johnson leads, which has been the Unionist Party of Britain, and which has fought Irish Union ever since 1922, when Ireland became independent, and before, is quietly deciding that in order to survive in England, to retain the hold of the English electorate, it has got eventually to accept that Northern Ireland is going to go. We are looking, and I think this is the big takeaway, this is the big long-term takeaway from all of this, we are looking at the first step, the first big step towards Irish Union. In other words, to Northern Ireland being separated from the United Kingdom and eventually joining the Republic of Ireland in a united Ireland. That is a radical change.
Within the EU. Within the EU.
That is a radical change. That is a huge change. If you know British history, you will know how huge a change that is. And it is the single biggest and most important takeaway from this whole affair. It will continue. This breakthrough, if you like, this break with Northern Ireland is something which will continue, whether this deal is accepted or not. The psychological shift has happened.
It's amazing.
And that is amazing. And as I said, I don't think it's been properly understood.
The psychological shift on whose behalf?
The psychological shift on
all sides.
On all sides, but most importantly, on the part of the Conservative Party and the British establishment. I mean, the British establishment has fought tooth and nail to keep Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom. I mean, we had the huge conflict in the 1970s and 1980s. We've had the attempt to, the separation of Northern Ireland from the rest of Ireland in 1922. We've had long periods of time when the Protestant parties in Northern Ireland were intimately aligned with the Conservative Party in London. We've had situations where British important British generals like General Montgomery during the Second World War, like General Alexander, another important British general during the Second World War. They were both Ulstermen, they were Ulster Protestants, and they were an integral part of the British Army. All of that, we've now seen the first big step towards that going. And it's extraordinary how quietly it's happened.
Yeah, but isn't it really extraordinary, given the history of the island of Ireland, is that it would take Britain to disentangle itself from the continent to finally get a resolution to something that, you know, the Northern Ireland was always a halfway measure. I mean, it was just, it was because the psychological effect of abandoning it. I mean, you have to remember, for better or worse, and certainly in my opinion, for worse, it was the last major colony that Britain had. And now disentangling itself from Brussels has actually united the island of Ireland. Who would have thought this when this whole Brexit thing started?
Well, indeed.
Alexander, to go off of Peter's point, Space Cat is going off of Peter's point. So what's the general consensus in Ireland?
Yes, right. If you're talking about the Republic of Ireland, the people in the south of Ireland, well, there the desire for Irish unity is something that everybody basically
it's a constant
supports. It's a constant. I mean, there are problems. I mean, Northern Ireland, absorbing Northern Ireland is going to be a massive economic and social shock for the Republic of Ireland. But there is no person in Southern Ireland you will meet who does not want Irish unity. I mean,
Alex, I have a question. Can you tell us, Northern Ireland, as far as the electorate is concerned, Northern Ireland, how did they stand on Brexit?
Well, this is now the great change, because of course, if we're talking about Northern Ireland was one of the regions in the 2016 referendum, along with Scotland and London, which voted against Brexit. It was England and Wales outside London voted for Brexit. Northern Ireland voted against Brexit, and an awful lot of Protestants voted against Brexit. Partly because they may have sensed that something like this would happen, though I don't think in their wildest dreams that they imagined it would happen so quickly, but because it has stabilised the political situation in Northern Ireland and has essentially ended the violent conflict there, to have this soft border with the Irish Republic. Now, I think what is happening now in Northern Ireland is turmoil. Political turmoil. The nationalist population, the historically Catholic population, which wants and has always wanted a united Ireland, they of course are very happy and they are supporting Boris Johnson's deal. The Protestant community is in chaos. I mean, the Northern Irish Party in Westminster, the Democratic Unionist Party, which has up to now supported the Conservative government, they feel deeply betrayed. And they are very unsure how to.
But isn't it paradoxical if you're saying that they voted to remain? Well, they're going to remain in the EU.
Yeah, they're going to remain in the EU. But because they never imagined that it would.
They would say that way because in the Republic of Ireland, the EU is very popular. It's a very popular idea because it is the Republic of Ireland is a target of a lot of EU funding, so they like that. Okay, so it's really interesting is you have Northern Ireland voting against Brexit, but they're going to get what they wanted. They're going to stay in the EU, but not within the UK. Yes. I mean, maybe eventually.
Eventually, I mean, I think it's important to stress this is not going to happen tomorrow. We're not going to see a united Ireland in a few months' time. This is a process that is going to play out over several years, perhaps many years. But now it seems to me the direction of travel is clear. I would add, I went to Ireland in March of this year, Northern Ireland, and my very clear feeling anyway was that more and more people in Northern Ireland were gradually coming round to the fact that sooner or later a united Ireland was going to happen. That was clearly my view. And I met people from both communities, both Catholic and Protestant, both nationalist and unionist. But I don't think anybody, even anybody expected it would have come so fast. And I think that the Protestant party, the Unionist party, are just stunned at the way in which this has been presented to them in the way that it has, almost in effect as a fait accompli. Now,
they feel betrayed, Alexander?
I think many of them do feel betrayed. And in fact, there's been a lot of talk of betrayal, I understand, within Northern Ireland. And the Democratic Unionist Party, the people who, as I said, who represent the Protestant community in Parliament in Westminster, are coming in with heavy criticism from many Protestants in Northern Ireland for the fact that they were basically asleep on the wheel and that they didn't see where this was going.
But do you think Boris Johnson consulted with them at all? I mean, again, from my perch here in Moscow, I mean, if Boris Johnson in London is making that deal over their heads, I mean, irrespective of how you feel about Brexit, that is a definition of betrayal.
Yes, I mean, what he did, he strung them along. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, he did it very ruthlessly, and he did it quite cleverly.
That is clever. It's very clever. I never would have thought of that.
No, I don't think most people did. But I mean, I must quickly say, though, that he does make it much more difficult for him to get this deal through the House of Commons tomorrow, because the Labour Party, most of the Labour Party will oppose it. The Liberal Democrats will all oppose it. The Scottish Nationalists will oppose it. The Ulster Unionists will now also oppose it. So in order to get this deal through, Boris Johnson needs two things. He needs to make sure that all the Conservative Party, including those Conservative MPs that had the whip taken from them a few weeks ago and are now sitting as independents, support this deal, and that is not guaranteed. Some of them may oppose it because they want a no-deal Brexit and they don't feel this goes far enough. Others may oppose it because they are unhappy about the betrayal of the Northern Irish. Still others may oppose it because basically they don't want any kind of Brexit at all, because they're die-hard Remainers. So it's not certain that all of them will vote for it. And also, the other thing that Boris Johnson needs is enough Labour MPs to either vote for this deal or to abstain. Now, as I have repeatedly pointed out, most Labour MPs represent constituencies which voted Leave in the general election. 19 of them have indicated that they would probably support a deal roughly on the lines of what we now see. It may be that that number will grow, but it's going to be touch and go. And I mean, we really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And if I have to say, looking at the parliamentary arithmetic, it looks extremely difficult at the moment to see this deal passing. Having said that, it's not impossible. Boris Johnson has the wind behind him, and he may be able to get it through. He's much closer, in my opinion, to getting this deal through than Theresa May ever was with her deal, which basically kept Britain indefinitely in the customs union with the EU in a way that served German interests rather than...
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. It's really interesting to me how Brussels said, you know, this is no more deals, no more negotiations, and then over the course of a very short number of weeks, that's exactly what happened. I found that to be quite remarkable, and I think it's one of the reasons why is because Merkel is out of the picture. I mean, Brussels is displaced Berlin in this endeavor, and I'm what I'm about to say. I stole from Alexander McKeris on WhatsApp about an hour and a half ago. So it's his words, but I'm going to say it, and he's just going to repeat it. Yeah. As Alexander McKeris put it, and I think it was so smart earlier this afternoon, is that what Theresa May did was negotiate a deal that Merkel wanted and not what the UK needed. Okay, and that was really the problem with her plan. And it looks like now that Brussels has stepped up, remarkable, and decided to get into the parlay here. I have to admit, I think Boris Johnson, his approach really is quite stunning. Yes. I mean, it's a combination I hadn't even imagined. Yes. So, I mean, I wrote to all you guys here, from clown to deal maker, and maybe, something's going on here. Okay. I mean, Alexander McKeris, the numbers, better than I ever could know, but you have to give him, a hat tip for his ingenuity. That's for sure. Because this is a deal now between the European Union and the UK, not Theresa May and Angela Merkel.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, the thing about Johnson is he's been quite clever. He's also been extremely ruthless. The way he's treated the Northern Irish Protestants, who have been loyal supporters, has been
the most loyal. They always are more British than the British.
Absolutely. Well, they are more. They are. If you go there, it's quite extraordinary how. They refer to themselves as loyalists, and they now see how that loyalty is being repaid. And I come back. Whatever happens tomorrow, as I said, this line has now been crossed. There has never been, in my lifetime, the same loyalty on the part of the English population towards Northern Ireland that there has been by the Northern Irish Protestant population towards the UK. Whatever happens, we're never going to go back to that.
Yeah, no prime minister since 1922 could have ever suggested this. No. Even uttered it. This is what makes it extraordinary.
No, exactly. Because, of course, what has happened is that in May of this year, during the European elections, the Conservative Party experienced a near-death experience with the rise of the Brexit Party. And if it's a question of political extinction in England or holding on to Northern Ireland, they will avoid political extinction in England, even if that means giving up Northern Ireland. That is the reality, and I think people in Northern Ireland need to start thinking about that. Now, I have to. Now, if we can explain what has happened with Merkel, Theresa May.
Can I read you something from the chat, Alexander, to kick that off?
Yeah.
What are the user says, which I think will kick off your discussion on Merkel. Yeah. This is from Stupefy 1974. Boris with big handshakes with Macron yesterday and ignored Merkel.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
This is now again. I'm going to go back a few programs that Alex and I did together, and I said that I was really surprised at the time of the UN General Assembly session in September how closely Macron and Boris Johnson seem to be communicating with each other. They even did a really remarkable thing, which is that they met Iranian President Rouhani together. And it struck me as surprising that more people weren't picking up on the implications of this. And I thought to myself, well, maybe these two have reached some kind of understanding. What I think is clear has happened is this. Boris Johnson is not as impressed by Angela Merkel as Theresa May was. Theresa May thought of Angela Merkel as the Queen of Europe. She thought she could do a deal with her, and she came back with a deal which kept Britain in the customs union.
Merkel's deal.
Yeah, Merkel, which kept Britain in the customs union, and therefore kept it Britain open to German manufacturing exports. And of course, there was this device of the Irish backstop, which basically meant that Britain could never leave. This is what always happens when you try and negotiate with Merkel. Merkel will always negotiate in a way
for Germany, not for the EU.
Not for the EU, not really for, she takes a very narrow line.
Same thing she did with Greece. That's what she did with Greece.
And indeed with Russia in 2014 over Ukraine and lots of things like that. She always takes this line, and she's also actually, by the way, very treacherous about the way she goes about doing it. Our former Prime Minister, David Cameron, was actually wrote about this in his memoirs. He said that there is such a thing as a half-life of a Merkel promise. You think you can agree trade-offs with her. What she does is she takes, but whatever she promises, she never gives. Anyway, that was how we ended up with this terrible Theresa May deal. Boris Johnson, who, by the way, speaks some German and speaks excellent French, fact which isn't widely known, seems to have grasped this. And what he did instead is he spoke to Macron, and I've said in previous programs that Macron, who is a fervid EU integrationist, would rather see the British out of the EU, because from his point of view, they've always acted as a drag to his integrationist European superstate projects. So he spoke with Macron. I think the two of them reached an understanding. And he also spoke with Leo Varadkar, the Prime Minister of Ireland. And basically he said to Leo Varadkar, I mean, he may not have said it in quite the words I'm going to say, don't stop me, because eventually you're going to get Northern Ireland.
Wow.
So he did the deal.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
so he did the deal. He did the deal. Now, Merkel is furious about this. She telephoned, when she found out what was going on, she telephoned Boris Johnson about a week ago. There was this incredible incendiary conversation between them, in which Merkel basically said, Northern Ireland must never leave the backstop, must never leave the customs union. And it was done in such a way as to imply that Britain must never leave the customs union. And this provoked great anger in Britain. And of course, she's now busy trying to undermine this agreement by saying, firstly, if Britain leaves on these terms, Britain will become this great competitor against the EU.
That's good.
That's good. But she's also saying, contradicting things that Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission President, and Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, have been saying, that if the British reject this deal tomorrow, there will be another extension. That's what Merkel is saying. Merkel is saying there will be another extension. Juncker and Varadkar, who must be assumed to be on close terms with the French, and are saying otherwise. So we have a different situation. I'm afraid I have a fire alarm going, so I'm just going to switch that off. And
All right, I got a question from you, Peter, in the chat though. Well, a lot of people.
It's the Brexit alarm.
It's the Brexit alarm. It's all burning down. Peter, will other countries follow suit, you think, in the EU now?
Well, I've said ever since the vote in 2016 that this is a precedent that haunts the Brussels bureaucracy. Absolutely. Well, what it is now is that the EU is no longer the Hotel California. You can leave now, okay? And it doesn't mean that I think other countries are going to take this as a blueprint and start the process, but it knows that you can defeat Brussels, okay? And so it will be worth the fight, okay? They're not immune. This is not this super state that is super strong and it can't reverse gears or change gears. And I think this is a very, very important precedent. And by the way, I think it's very healthy. Yeah. It's very healthy to be able to say, look, if things aren't working out the way they are now, we need to change things. And they have to become, I'll betray Alexander Makiris and I are close in age, the European Economic Community, that's what I like. If you look from the Second World War up until the creation of the EU, you had in that time the European Economic Community. That was an engine of unbelievable growth, unbelievable post-war growth. The European Union does not have the same potential. And when things don't go right, they say we need more integration, more integration. Yeah. No, that stifles growth, innovation, and it destroys cultures. I mean, I'm conservative. I think that there's a lot of Italian and Greek and German and French and et cetera culture that needs to be preserved and not just homogenized into something bland and ugly and uninteresting. Okay, so that's a long answer to the question. It sets a precedent, an important one, and you could see different countries reacting differently from that precedent. So it's a healthy thing, absolutely healthy.
Alexander, can you give us your assessment of the deal? I'm sure you've read through whatever
Yeah.
points. I mean, you've gone through the points and you've seen everything. You said it's different than May's deal.
Yeah.
Can you take us into the ins and outs? I mean, you know, the fisheries. I see what people are talking about in the chat, for example. Who controls the fisheries? What's the deal with trade with the UK outside of the EU? What's going on? Give us some of the details as to how this deal is.
I mean, it's still a soft Brexit. I mean, we're not talking about a clean break Brexit, which is one reason why people like Nigel Farage are not happy with this. So, I mean, people who want a clean break Brexit are not, this is not it. This is not it. And let's be very clear about this. Boris Johnson clearly doesn't want that. He's not working towards that objective. I think it became fairly clear to me back in September when he very, very tamely accepted the Ben Letwin law that we were not going to get a clean-cut, hard Brexit. I mean, he wasn't working, he wasn't fighting for that objective. What this does is that it does, to some extent, loosen Britain's involvement with the regulatory system in the EU. So Britain can, as I read this document, it can start to negotiate its own trade deals. Under Theresa May's deal, it could not negotiate its own trade deals with other countries. Now, the British, in theory, are regaining control of their fisheries. They're in theory gaining control of their abilities to carry out regulation. In practice, that's going to be fairly restricted, and we will see what kind of deal emerges out of this, because remember, this is supposed to be only a transition deal. There are supposed to be another 4 years of negotiations before we arrive at our final destination.
Why do you say in theory? Like, can you take us a little deeper into that?
Right. This is a transitional arrangement between the EU and Britain. It's not supposed to be the hard and fast, indefinite arrangement that will regulate their economic future. So it's possible that at the end of this period, it will be replaced by, let us say, a free trade arrangement, or even conceivably a no-deal arrangement. I mean, that's not impossible. Now, that could not really happen under Theresa May's deal, because even though Theresa May's deal was a transitional arrangement also, it in effect kept Britain within the customs union and prevented Britain ever leaving the customs union, because the EU was in a position to veto any step that might have created a soft border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. That was the Irish backstop. So Britain was trapped within the EU customs union indefinitely up to the moment when the EU decided that it could leave. This deal permits a proper negotiation of the future arrangements between Britain and the EU to take place. That's what makes it fundamentally different, but it does so at the price of weakening the link with Northern Ireland.
So essentially, it's a Boris Brexit. The thing, I mean, is this is this politically expedient without really having Brexit?
Well, it is a Brexit of a kind. I mean, of a kind. I mean, it's a soft Brexit. It retains, as I said, significant interconnections between Britain and the EU for a transition period. It is not a clean-cut, no-deal Brexit. Boris Johnson clearly was not going to go for that. I mean, for whatever reason, maybe because he realized he couldn't get through the House of Commons, or because he didn't have the stomach for the kind of battle that would have involved, whatever the reason, he wasn't going to go for it.
Okay,
now, it kicks the can down the road,
okay, exactly.
But it does put the British in a better, much stronger negotiating position than the one they had under Theresa May's, as a result of Theresa May's deal, where there would have been no real negotiation at all, because whatever they agreed, it would have had to be agreed by Berlin. And can I just say something, by the way, Peter, when you say that the EU is no longer Hotel California, and that this deal shows that you can take on Brussels and win, I agree with that, actually, but the capital city you need to think about is not so much Brussels, but Berlin. It is Berlin that is the big loser in all of this. And this is a major indicator that German power, and specifically Angela Merkel's power, is now waning. And that is an important fact to bear in mind.
Yeah, the Merkel Reich is wobbly.
It is wobbling.
All right, I have a question now.
Yeah.
All right, there's a vote tomorrow, correct?
Yeah.
And what if Boris Johnson fails? What happens?
Well, right, okay. Now this is where things begin to become very complicated, and
really?
Where we have to.
It starts becoming.
It starts. Well, I mean, if we have a deal, if it passes tomorrow, we leave the EU on the 31st of October. I mean, I think that there's no question about it, and that would simplify things. But if it doesn't pass in Parliament tomorrow, and I think it's touch and go.
Well, the bookies say 50-50.
Yeah, well, for bookies say 50-50. I would say 55-45 against it passing. I think it's more likely to fail than to pass for various reasons. If it fails to pass, what happens next? Boris Johnson is legally required by the Ben-Letwin Act to ask the EU for a 3-month extension. Now, Merkel says they will grant it. Juncker has said they won't grant it. Vardika has said they won't grant it.
And Macron also.
And Macron has sort of hinted at it. If that sticks, if they decide to go against Merkel on this, then I predict that there will be another vote on this deal in Parliament early next week, and it will pass. But the other possibility is that there will be another 3-month extension. My own guess is that at that point, one of two things is going to happen. Either Boris Johnson is going to try and push and force through a general election, and I think there's a fair chance now that he will get it. Or alternatively, he will put the deal back before the House of Commons, much like Theresa May did, and he will press on to try to get a Brexit on the 31st of January, basically along the same with the same deal as the one he has now.
If he calls a general election, will it be a referendum on Brexit?
It'll be a referendum on Brexit, and it will be a referendum on his deal, because one of the things that the Labour Party, very foolishly in my opinion, has done, and very much against Jeremy Corbyn's better judgment, is that most of the public now perceive it to be a Remain party. So Boris Johnson will be going into that election as the person who will say, I have a deal, it's a perfectly workable deal, the EU accepts it, it suits British interests, vote for me and I will get Brexit done on the 31st of October. If you vote for the Labour Party, you are voting for a completely nebulous, unclear situation where we simply don't know what they're going to do, but the reality is that they don't want Brexit at all. I come back to what I've said many times. Most of England outside London voted for Brexit. Most Labour MPs, most Conservative MPs represent seats that voted leave. I think if we have a general election on those terms, the odds must be on Boris Johnson and the Conservatives winning, perhaps not by a landslide, but with a significant majority.
It seems go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
For Peter and for Alexander, Tracy R says the EU are happy, they're ecstatic. And this has me thinking, Peter and Alexander as well. Why do you think the EU would be okay with this deal? I mean,
well, it's interesting.
I'm playing a little devil's advocate here. Is the EU saying now we have the UK?
No, it's a great question.
Where they go.
it's a great question. I would maybe kind of change it slightly. It was a question I actually wanted to ask Alex, and I'm curious. Is where's the level of fatigue? Is it the EU or is it the UK?
Yeah.
Because I had a guest on Crosstalk a couple of weeks ago, a very interesting guy, and he's basically fed up with the UK and wants the UK just to get out because the European Union wants to move forward because this is a wound. This is like a festering wound for the EU. At first, they thought they could strong arm the UK with threats and everything. The EU, Brussels is really good at doing that, okay? But it didn't work. And now they have to reassess here. I mean, it seems to me that the EU has gotten nervous about this because the rest of the countries of the EU are watching this very intently. There's a lot of people in the EU that are disgruntled with Brussels' rule over them, very undemocratic. And I think Brussels needs a decision one way or another. And I think that's one of the reasons why Juncker and Macron, Macron for his own selfish, childish political ambitions. But I think the EU it needs to get some kind of resolution here because the longer this goes on, it doesn't make the EU look good. It doesn't. Go ahead.
I don't think that the EU collectively is monolithically ecstatic with this deal. One person is not happy with this deal, and that is Angela Merkel. Now, I follow Angela Merkel very, very closely. I've got many contacts in Germany, and I know I can see what she's trying to do. She is trying to get the deal defeated tomorrow. That's why she says, if the deal is defeated tomorrow, there will have to be a 3-month extension. That's why she tried to wreck the deal with this telephone conversation with Boris Johnson a week ago. She is not happy with this because it is not giving her what she considers Germany wants. Now, other people in the EU, and we're talking now about the very extreme hardline integrationists, of which, to be very clear, Angela Merkel is not one. We're talking about people like Macron, are very happy about this because one, as Perita rightly say, they see this whole Brexit thing as an open wound, which is basically contaminating everything else that the EU is doing, but also because they are very, very exasperated they have been very exasperated for a very long time by the behavior of the British, who, whenever a proposal for integration comes along, are guaranteed to oppose it. So from their point of view, from the point of view of people like Macron, get the British out, get Nigel Farage and his Brexit party out of the European Parliament, where they are a pain in the neck, frankly, for those sorts of people. And then Macron and the hardline integrationists can take Merkel on one-to-one, because Merkel has always up to now been able to align with the British to stop their more extreme moves. The reason Merkel does not want EU integration in that way is because the very last thing any German leader is prepared to have is a situation where fiscal shortfalls in EU countries are paid for through German savings. That is an absolutely toxic policy in Germany, politically toxic. The Germans will never accept it. What the Germans want is not an integrated superstate EU. They want a captive market EU, which they can treat as a big hinterland for German industry.
Use the right word, hegemony.
Well, hegemony, a political and economic hegemony over Europe. They do not want a situation where Europe dictates to Germany, as opposed to one where Germany dictates to Europe. So there is always this division, and it's one that I think a lot of people don't understand. And Merkel has come to embody this to an extraordinary degree.
Alexander, could you say that the EU is they're masters at kicking the can down the road? I mean, they could do this for years, and they have done it.
Oh,
They're
of course
very
they
good
can.
at kicking the can.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the
Yeah.
4-year interim period. I want to get to a super chat. I want to skip some
Yeah.
super chats and get to the end because Nigel read my mind here. And his question is, and this is what I was thinking too, does Alexander think that during a 4-year interim period and perhaps change of UK government, Britain may actually choose remain?
Oh,
Is that
yes.
an option? Because you mentioned the 4-year interim period, so it's really not a Brexit at all. Look, from what I understood, we're entering a very long negotiation.
Oh, absolutely.
Period where anything can happen depending on what government is around.
Absolutely, this is entirely correct. I mean, Britain would
Thank you, Nigel, for the super chat.
Yeah, Britain would leave the political structures of the EU. It would no longer be part of the. It would no longer be represented in the European Council. It would no longer be represented in the European Parliament. There would no longer be a European Commissioner in the Commission in Brussels, and the British, as I said, would, in theory, have the right to start negotiating trade agreements with other countries. But of course, the devil is always in the detail, and it does depend very strongly on who conducts the negotiations over this 4-year period. What kind of eventual arrangements we could have. We could have a free trade arrangement. We could have a no-deal arrangement in which Britain ends up trading with the EU on World Trade Organization terms. And there are some people in the Conservative Party who are currently holding out for that. They're saying to Boris Johnson, we will vote for this deal if we have your assurance that this will all end in an arrangement where we might eventually end up with a World Trade Organization terms deal.
Okay.
There are those.
Okay.
But you know, just finish, Peter. But of course, if we have, let us say, a Corbyn government where the EU negotiator, the British EU negotiator, is Keir Starmer, who is a fanatical Remainer, we could end up with something entirely different. And it is not impossible at the end of that process that they could try to bring Britain back in. But remember, they could try to bring Britain back in even after Britain completely leaves the EU.
Yes, true.
I mean, you know, so,
who will have during that 4-year hiatus, you know, that process there, who has the most leverage?
Well, who does indeed have the most leverage?
Well, Peter, a super chat on that before we get a super chat from Sparky says extended transition favors Remain. What do you think, Peter Alexander? Does extended transition favor Remain?
That's my question.
It wouldn't be. I mean, I think if we were looking at a Theresa May deal where Britain was inside the customs union and could not leave,
would be with Brussels.
The leverage would be overwhelmingly with Brussels. And actually, if I have to be frank, I think that would eventually have resulted in Britain actually rejoining the political structures. In other words, becoming a full member of the EU again.
Brexit in name only.
That would have been Brexit in name only. Now, who has the leverage this time? It's been a more leveled playing field. But of course, the British need to continue to negotiate hard. Now, will they? I don't know. I'm not, advocating anything here. All I am saying is they have more room for maneuver than they did. And if we have a general election, I'm absolutely sure that Boris Johnson, one of his major selling points will be, if this deal passes, I am the person to negotiate our long-term arrangements with the EU. I'm the person you can trust because you cannot trust Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer because Keir Starmer doesn't really have his heart in this thing. And that would be a powerful argument.
Yeah, but I mean, the interesting thing for me is we go back to the democratic angle of all of this. I mean, the people did vote for this here. I mean, if you have, I don't care if it's a Labour or conservative government, but if there's the perception that it's only Brexit in name only, I mean, the impact that'll have on the electorate could be really overwhelming. Because that is, we've talked about the Northern Irish being betrayed here. You could have the entire Leave voters feel definitely, I mean, they feel betrayed. This has lasted so long, but then that will just be the nail in the coffin here. I mean, it kind of very broadly, again, from my perch out here in Moscow, is that this whole process has undermined the legitimacy of both major political parties, really damaged it.
Well, you saw that, Peter, in the May European Parliament election, where the Conservative Party collapsed and the Labour Party saw its vote plunge because many people across England, especially England, I emphasise always England, felt that what Theresa May was offering was Brexit in name only. Now, I can't quite say this about Boris Johnson's proposal, because I think it's a point I really want to explain. Britain would leave the EU on the 31st of October. There would be some economic and commercial arrangements that continued for a period afterwards, a 4-year period afterwards. But then, as I said, even those could be severed. Now, what the British make of that is ultimately up to them. It's up to them to decide how strongly they're going to negotiate with the EU over this sort of period. If at the end of the day, we get a situation where a Remain government comes in and decides that it's going to negotiate very weakly, and we're going to end up essentially reintegrating ourselves with the EU, finding ourselves back in the customs union, perhaps even finding ourselves back in a situation where we're rejoining the political institutions, either, in other words, a Brexit in name only, or no Brexit at all, then of course people are going to feel hugely betrayed and very angry, and we're going to see a potential situation in that case where there would be a very strong political reaction.
Well, what I think could be very, very damaging, and again, it's the optics of it all. Even if we get into this 4-year transition period, if the UK does not have any political representation or institutional representation in EU institutions, then it's almost kind of like the worst of all possible worlds, because you're still in, but you have no decision making at all on all levels here.
Okay.
I mean, that smells like high treason.
Well, can I get okay? Can I come back to what was the original sin in this entire process? Because unlike most people, I've actually read Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, and I'm familiar with what the legal things were. The transition period, the actual transition period, was supposed to be the 2 years between invoking Article 50 and leaving it. The original idea of the treaty was you invoke Article 50, you sort out your economy to prepare for life outside the EU, so that when that 2-year period ends, you are completely free, you leave the EU. Unfortunately and disastrously, Theresa May and the British establishment interpreted it completely differently.
Intentionally.
They decided.
Thank you.
They
Intentionally.
decided. They decided that instead of actually working to remodel the British economy over that 2-year period, so that the effect of leaving the EU at the end of it would be mitigated, they treated that 2-year period as a time to negotiate yet another transition period.
Wiggle away.
Exactly. Now, we are unfortunately where we are. That was what Theresa May did after she became Prime Minister. And that is why we've got ourselves into this disaster that we have. Boris Johnson, and I want to make this very clear, I'm not a great fan of Boris Johnson, by the way. There's lots of things about him I don't like, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm rooting for him. But at least Boris Johnson inherited from Theresa May an absolutely catastrophic situation. given that he was not going to go for a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October, and I have said many times on our various programs that I think all the scare stories about what a disaster a no-deal Brexit would be are completely wrong. Given that he was not going to do that, you could argue that with this deal, he's done the best of a bad job. He's done it by basically selling off the Irish.
Yeah.
What about Brexit Party, Alexander?
Well,
how's Farage going to take all this?
Well, I mean, he's opposing it. I mean, he has said this all along. Now, I think now at the moment, I ought to say he's again, because this is completely unexpected for him, just as the Remainers, the hardline Remainers in the House of Commons, never expected Boris Johnson to come back with a deal, nor did Farage. So he's been left floundering a bit over the last couple of days. I mean, he even seemed to be defending in a tweet the Ben Letwin Act, which I think was an extremely unwise thing to do. But I think once he's got over his shock, if this deal passes, he will be there and he will be pushing for a complete break at the end of the transition period.
After 4 years.
Well, it might not take 4 years. I mean, 4 years is supposed to be the absolute limit.
But it'll all depend who the negotiator is.
But it will all depend,
because you can drag your feet, or you can actually say, let's just tie a bow on this and get it done. I mean, we have ambiguity, a lot of ambiguity. Oh,
we have a huge ambiguity. But having said that, provided he can mobilize his people, which I think he, by the way, can, he will be there always pushing, always relentlessly pushing for a harder position to be taken than the mainstream parties would. And if it's the Conservatives in power conducting this negotiation, they will have Nigel Farage, over their shoulder, and they will constantly feel that they have to take a harder line than perhaps some of them might wish, because, as I said, the European Parliament election in May showed how he could be a potentially existential threat to them. So, he's still going to be there. If I have to say who I think have been completely blindsided by this, it is the hardline. Farage has been, as I said, somewhat befuddled, but he'll get over it. It's the hardline Remainers in Parliament who really don't know what to do, because they have spent most of the last couple of months claiming that Boris Johnson was going to go for a no-deal Brexit. In reality, putting up all these obstacles to him going for a no-deal Brexit, because when in reality, what they were looking for was no Brexit at all. And now Boris Johnson, to their shock, has come back with a deal which the EU is supporting, and a deal which, as I said, is more attractive to many people in Britain than the one that Theresa May had negotiated. Bear in mind, it was the Remainers in Britain who were insisting that the EU would never budge on the deal that Theresa May had negotiated. So they are in shock at the moment. They are frantically trying to think of some reason to vote against this thing and to try and block this thing. And of course, they're coming up with all sorts of reasons. But they have been put in a far more difficult position than they ever imagined they would be. It doesn't mean that they've given up. And as I said, I predict tomorrow they will all vote against it.
This was a master chess move. I give it. I mean, I have my issues with Boris Johnson as well, but I didn't expect this from him, and I think it's a master stroke. And we need people like this right now. Man, he's thinking outside the box. You got to give him credit for that.
Well, he's certainly done that. I mean, as I said, I don't think anybody expected that a Conservative Prime Minister would sell out the Northern Irish. That's what he's done. Very clear about it. In quite the way that he's done. The Northern Irish didn't expect that he would do that. And as I said, he strung them along.
Yeah, they probably feel like the Kurds right now. Yeah.
They do feel exactly like the Kurds. Not a bad comparison, actually.
Wow, what a stunning turn of events. You guys want to do some super chats?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's.
All right.
Let's.
From Tristan Coates, £5 super chat. We are all waiting for a video with puppies on laps. You'll get lots more likes. Peter just had his puppy on his lap, so hit that like button, everybody.
My dogs, unfortunately, they're too big to have on one's lap anyway. But they're out walking with Catherine, my wife. So
they're celebrating the Brexit news.
It says a lot that puppies trump our political analysis, but that's the way life is.
Yeah.
All right. From Megawatt, €10 super chat. Thank you, Megawatt, for that super chat. From Stephen Garrett, super chat. Seems likely that MPs may vote down the deal, hoping to revoke Article 50, given Juncker has ruled out an extension that will make no deal likely.
Yes, well, I mean, I think the point to say here is that Juncker has ruled out an extension. Vardica seems to be talking against an extension. Macron seems to be talking against an extension. Merkel seems to be talking for an extension. So we can't be certain that there won't be an extension if this deal is voted down tomorrow. Now, if there is no extension and if the deal is voted down tomorrow, then I think this viewer, I'm sorry, I didn't get his name, is absolutely right. The last throw in the Remainer dice at that point is to try to get a vote to revoke Article 50 and to call Brexit off entirely. And we could see pressure coming from within the House of Commons amongst the hardline Remainers and their supporters in the media for that to happen. My own guess is that Labour MPs, there are far too many Labour MPs representing Leave constituencies who would probably balk at that, at doing that. But, you know, I come back to what I just said. These people don't give up, and we won't be out of the EU until we are.
The amazing thing is that at the end of the day, it's all about Angela Merkel's political calculations and her agenda. I mean, that I find that humiliating for the UK, to be honest with you. I think it's quite humiliating.
Well, right? You're absolutely right, Peter. And I think it's, not before time, actually. One of the great problems that I've always found is that it's very difficult to actually explain to people the kind of person that Merkel is, because her public image is so different. I mean, she is a very, very difficult person to negotiate with. And as I said, someone who always pursues German interests. This isn't properly understood in Britain. The media doesn't talk about that. And so the result is that this alliance, which there in effect is between the hardline Remainers and Merkel, never gets the kind of publicity that it deserves. The British people sense it. They sense, as they showed in the European Parliament elections, that they don't want a Brexit in name only. They don't want a Merkel-dictated Brexit, which isn't a real
I thought
Brexit.
you were going to say dictatorship, but that's okay.
Well, I know. But I mean, they don't want it. But as I said, it's never formulated properly because very, very few people understand it. I really want to add one important caveat here, which is, of course, Merkel is no longer the dominant figure even in Germany that she once was. And there are many, many people in Germany also who are very unhappy with the kind of political game that she's been playing for a long time. Certainly, she has her constituency in Germany, which supports her. But, I know Germany very well, and there are very many Germans who do not want Germany to be playing this game of hegemony in Europe. What they would like is a much looser Europe than the one they already have, because they feel that this kind of situation ultimately isn't good for Germany either. We mustn't fall into the trap of thinking that all Germans are like Merkel is.
Okay, from Valley S super chat, €20. Thank you, Valley, for that super chat. And from Anar 5855. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sky News indicates an estimated 316 MPs are expected to vote for the deal. Johnson still needs 4 votes. Is it possible he'll get the votes?
Well, it's possible that he'll get the votes. Now, I have to say straight away, I mean, you know, we're getting all these, these sort of head figures. I mean, at the moment,
guesstimates.
Yeah, guesstimates. I mean, the other thing I must say straight away about British MPs is they lie. I mean, people will tell you they're going to vote one way and then they vote another. Don't make the assumption that there's any accuracy behind these numbers.
Okay, from Sparky Super Chat. Did Boris stir up enough uncertainty by selling out Northern Ireland, where his deal will be voted down by Parliament?
Well, it's possible. I mean, and again, it's a very, very good point. There will be some conservatives who might have supported this deal, but who will be extremely unhappy at the betrayal, as they will see it, of Northern Ireland, because the connections between the Conservative Party and Northern Ireland are so strong. Yeah. But can I just say something? I mean, the Conservative Party is notoriously ruthless about questions involving its own survival, and sentimental considerations rarely play very strong, carry very strong weight when it comes to that issue. So I suspect that the great majority of Conservatives will support this deal.
Okay. And on top of it, I mean, again, you know, you have the Conservative Party, and it's an alignment with the Unionists in Northern Ireland, but correct me if I'm wrong, Alexander, but I mean, the Irish issue is not a burning issue for most people in England.
Oh, it isn't. I mean, most British people in England don't think about Northern Ireland at all. I mean, they don't think of, I mean, this is an important point to say, they don't think of Northern Ireland as British. As somebody who knows Northern Irish people and likes them, and I'm talking both about Catholics and Protestants, I have always been, frankly, embarrassed by the indifference and indeed, if I may say, condescension that most British people feel towards Northern Ireland. It has always seemed to me that the Northern Irish Protestants are loyal, have always been loyal to a nation that has never reciprocated that loyalty.
Fair.
And I've always felt very awkward about this. I've always felt that sooner or later, this betrayal that we are now seeing would come.
Okay. From Brandon, Super Chat. Hey guys, I noticed that the EU leader expressed an aura of sadness towards the UK leaving the EU. Oh. How important was this, and was it genuine?
No, I mean, I'm not sure which EU leader.
Juncker. See, I think he was quoted as saying, "This is a sad day."
I don't know. Was it before or after?
Or after, exactly. I wouldn't pay much attention to Herr Juncker's or Monsieur Juncker's.
You saw his behavior at the presser, didn't you?
Absolutely. Well,
he was like, "Whoa!" Just bellowing out at the press.
Okay. I know. Go ahead. Yeah, my own personal feeling is that, of course, Juncker is about to. His job is coming to an end, but he will probably deep down be quite pleased to see the British out and his job done.
I think so too.
That's my own personal guess.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, from Sparky, Northern Ireland thinking. Wait. What just happened? ?
Well, indeed. I mean, as I said, I think the people of Northern Ireland, I mean, Protestant people of Northern Ireland, many of them must be in shock today.
Okay.
But they got indirectly what they wanted, to remain.
Yeah.
That's the paradox here. They wanted to remain, but you're going to have to remain with the Republic of Ireland.
Yes.
If you want to remain.
Yes.
Awesome Vlogs, £5 super chat. The Ben Letwin Act states, quote, unless Parliament approves a no deal, end quote. The vote tomorrow is deal versus no deal. So is the Ben Letwin Act not now bypassed?
Well, in effect it is, because what would happen, as I said, is that if this vote passes tomorrow, the Ben-Letwin Act really is completely meaningless. It has no value because Parliament will have passed a deal. So there's no need in that case to ask for an extension. Boris Johnson has ruled it out. Juncker has ruled it out. Leo Varadkar says there isn't any need for one. So that would be the end of it. If Parliament rejects the deal tomorrow, I think in that situation, Boris Johnson does ask for an extension. But we have now a situation which the framers of the Ben-Letwin Act never anticipated, which is where some EU leaders, Juncker, Varadkar, perhaps Macron, are hinting that they will vote against an extension. That is not something that Hilary Benn and Oliver Letwin and Grieve and Philip Hammond and all these people ever imagined. That is not the scenario they expected.
Okay, super chat from Sparky. Peter, Macron has conspired with Boris Johnson and he has betrayed his masters, i.e. Macron has betrayed his masters.
Well, it seems to me that Macron this season opening here with the weakening of Merkel, and we've already said it here, that Merkel's weakened within Germany itself. I said earlier, I think Macron is seeing this as a opportunity, but for very different reason. He is a supremo integrationist, okay? I mean, fine, if the UK is out, then he wants to move forward with his integration because this whole thing is a festering wound on the EU, Brexit. And Macron sees an opening, a weakened Germany, and he sees himself, and he wants to be a statesman, and instead of being a real politician in his own country, he wants to be a European figure, not a French figure. So by definition, politics is about opportunism, and he's getting himself, trying to pivot himself into that position here. No, and his masters are integrationists, so he's not betraying anyone. He's their boy. He's their boy, okay? And now I'm going to be curious, if anything has been said during our program here that needs to be remembered and taken away from this is what Alexander McKeer so accurately and poignantly talked about, is that Merkel is a German economic nationalist and wants German economic hegemony over the entire continent, minus the UK. If it can't keep it, fine. But it wants, and it's been doing this. I mean, look at it. The Deutschmark was replaced with the euro. The euro is a German currency. That's how they see it. Okay, and Macron comes from the integrationist thread of the European Union landscape, okay? And they're very, very different. They can overlap, all right? But the political standing of Merkel, and Germany's economy is in recession, they don't have a lot of leverage right now, okay? That's why I go back to the point is that at the end of the day, you're gonna have MPs deciding on Merkel's vision for Europe. That's what it's gonna be about. That is historically, folks, that's a pretty scary thought considering recent history, okay?
All right, from Saltwater Ballads, £2 super chat. Thank you for that super chat. From Sparky, no deal now ends Brexit. Boris's deal doesn't.
Well, no, it doesn't end Brexit. And that's a very good, very important point. As I said, if we had a no deal Brexit on the 31st of October, then I mean, the situation would be over, essentially. I mean, there would probably be a negotiation at some point of some kind to agree some kind of free trade arrangement over time. But the basic issue of Brexit would be resolved. And I have said many times on many programs that if you want to see this thing finally and conclusively ended, then that is what you should work towards, a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October. Boris Johnson doesn't want that. And we are going to have, after the 31st of October, assuming this deal passes tomorrow, we're going to have negotiations and more debates, and there will be battles still between people who want a close relationship with Europe, people who want to take us further out of Europe, and people who want to bring us in entirely. So I'm afraid that's absolutely right. It is not the end of this thing. But there we are. I mean, you know, we are looking at that situation. As I said, I don't think there is any real possibility of a no-deal Brexit now on the 31st of October. Boris Johnson doesn't want it, and so we're not going to get it because he is the only person who might conceivably have been able to deliver it.
All right.
That siren, I thought it was the YouTube police going to Maciris's house.
Ah, well.
All right.
We have the Extinction Rebellion going on in Britain.
We saw the videos of the train and them pulling them down.
So I'm sorry to say some of these sirens that you're probably hearing are connected to that. I mean, we're not quite Hong Kong country yet, but as I said, we're heading that way.
All right, from Lord Brett Sinclair. Boris has boxed the Ramoners into a corner they can't escape from. Well done. Well done, Boris.
Yeah, I think that's entirely right. I mean, I qualify this. I mean, if you want a no-deal Brexit, which is what some people wanted, then I mean, he's not perhaps done quite so well. But the Ramoners, and that's a beautiful phrase, the Ramoners do find themselves, as we said, in a position that they never imagined that they would be. What they expected is that Boris would be forced at some point would never come up with a deal, that there would never be a deal because the EU would never agree to a deal with him, that he'd be forced to ask for an extension, that there would then be a vote of confidence, which he would lose, and there would then be a general election, which the Labour Party would win because he would have failed completely to deliver Brexit on the 31st of October. And in that situation, they expected it would result in a Labour victory with as a hardline Remainer, Keir Starmer, as the negotiator, and we would eventually have ended up in a situation with either Britain remaining in the EU because that was the deal that was done, or a second referendum rigged to achieve that same outcome. What they have instead, which they never imagined in their worst fears, is Boris Johnson coming back with a deal which he's negotiated with the EU. That was completely unexpected. It's thrown all their calculations and all their plans into chaos, and they're struggling, as I'm speaking now, to come up with a plan. I'm going to add one very last point on this. If it is true, and I'm not putting very much credence on this, if it is true that Boris Johnson is only 4 votes short of getting the House of Commons to agree his deal tomorrow, then I think it is almost a certainty that he will find those 4 votes.
I do
that's the way things work in Britain. I mean, he will find people to do that. But I'm very skeptical about these reports. I think we should always take them with a huge pinch of salt because people do lie.
Yeah, and the media lies too. Okay?
And the media lies too, exactly.
That's for sure. From Sparky Super Chat, Peter Alexander, Boris leaves himself an enigma, traitor or fool? ? You did say cloud. Peter,
it's one of the interesting things. Again, an outsider looking in here. And Boris Johnson has always been an enigma for me. But I think he's probably quite intelligent. I think the kind of buffoonish behavior is done intentionally, so you underestimate him. Trump is the same way. You underestimate them, but when push comes to shove, they can come out swinging, and you have no idea what's coming at you because you never expected it. And I think Boris Johnson is doing this right now. He was the prime minister of low expectations, and you underestimated him, and now he's come out and he showed his hand, and a lot of people are like we are. I mean, I have to say, I am bewildered by it. It's a master stroke. I don't know if it's going to work, but this was something. I mean, we all love politics here, and he's come up with something I never expected. He threw out a card I thought no one would ever play because I didn't think it ever existed.
Well, can I just say what I've heard about Boris Johnson, and I've heard it from several people. Odd enough, I know one person who knows him very well, but we've never talked about him. But from other people, that he's highly intelligent, that he plays the clown so much that he's lost the ability to stop playing the clown, which is a problem. It's one reason why people don't take him seriously. That he's lazy and that he's not a good manager. So, the fact that he's not a good manager and not a good administrator has not been a problem in this negotiation. This negotiation has brought out his skills. The fact that he talks several languages, the fact that he has quite a lot of charm, the fact that he's politically, as we've seen, very ruthless and very focused on achieving his goal. But over the long term, if he succeeds in this, he may eventually fail as prime minister because, as I said, he's not much of a manager. That's what I've heard about him.
Okay, from Stu281, super chat. No surprises in politics, guys.
Yeah,
Well,
there's that saying. I used to teach history at the University of California, and it's one of those paradoxical questions you throw out to undergraduates. Does history make great men, or does great men make history, or I should say, person? But Boris Johnson this is like a perfect storm. I mean, his skill set, as displayed by Alexander Mercuris, it was exactly what Britain needed right now. Is his skill set?
Yes. Yes.
All right, from Sparky Super Chat, extended delay is part of scorched earth strategy.
Well, indeed. I mean, if we get another 3 months delay, and if the government falls over this period, and we end up with a general election, and the Labour Party wins, or if Boris Johnson somehow loses his nerve, which is not impossible, by the way, and we go on getting extensions, which is what we have seen happen up to now, then of course that is exactly a policy. That is, I think, that sums up very well, by the way, what was the Angela Merkel, Theresa May policy, which is go on grinding on the same deal endlessly, getting extension after extension after extension until everybody's worn out, and they simply give up. It didn't in the end happen. And let's be very clear, the reason it didn't happen was because Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party stormed to victory in the European Parliamentary elections in May. If they hadn't done, I mean, that approach would probably have succeeded.
Okay, from Sparky Super Chat, US didn't sacrifice in World War I and World War II for the UK to surrender.
Well, no. I would, as somebody who lives in Britain, I would say that one shouldn't overestimate the extent of the American contribution in Britain's survival.
Come on!
The British played a role in it too.
The British played a role in it,
and the Americans came out very much on top from the two world wars. Yeah. I mean, Britain ceased to be the great global power after the First World War, and after the Second World War, I mean, we became very, very indebted to the US and basically became their ally. So, I think that certainly they did make sacrifices, but if you're looking at this geopolitically, they didn't do so badly.
Well, no, they made sacrifices to displace Britain on the world stage.
Exactly.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Okay, from Sparky Super Chat, Northern Ireland's a stepchild like East Pakistan was. Will they become the next Bangladesh? Will they become their own country? No UK, no Ireland.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think it's sustainable to make Northern Ireland a separate country. I don't
think they don't even want it.
I don't think they really want it. I mean, I think there will be a united Ireland if this scenario that I've discussed follows its course, which I think it will, by the way, eventually. There will be major problems in integrating Northern Ireland with Southern Ireland. The two societies have gone apart in many ways. I mean,
very costly too, no?
Very, very costly.
But they're in the EU.
Well, indeed.
Okay.
Well, indeed.
See, that's the trump card, and that is why Northern Ireland will accept this, because they get to remain. Okay, and one has to wonder what kind of behind closed doors talks were about. Okay, this, you're going to lose this, but you're going to gain this. Okay, and Alexander Mercuris is right. They are different societies in many ways, and they consciously went on different paths. But the ultimate goal, will each side get what they want? And that's where you start. Okay, how do you want this to end? Okay, I mean, being someone of Irish ancestry, I followed the Troubles very closely growing up, and it was very horrific and very traumatizing for Irish Americans, because it's something that was unacceptable.
Yes.
Unacceptable. And I think the American side, what was the name of the senator, Alexander McCurris?
I can't remember now, but
yeah,
I know who you mean.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a great historic move, okay? And the Good Friday agreements are so very important for both societies. And it's so important. And plus, the desire to stay in the European Union, those two pillars, the Good Friday agreements and the desire to stay in the EU, is a wonderful platform to move forward.
I'm going to add something, which is, of course, having been to Northern Ireland. I mean, I was struck by how Irish it is, actually. I mean, you feel closer, even in Northern Ireland, much closer to the Irish Republic, culturally and whatever, than you do to London. I mean, that was absolutely my feeling about it. So I think we shouldn't overstress the difference either. Can I just make a point about the Protestants?
Senator Monahan?
Monahan.
No,
I'm looking in the chat. No.
Well, I'll find it.
Yeah, but can I just say something?
Keep talking.
Can I just add something else, which is, of course, Southern Ireland became independent of Britain in 1922. It is now 2019. I mean, the Northern Irish Protestants have been able to keep, through this link with Britain and independence from the Irish Republic, that has gone on for 100 years. So yes, I understand why they feel betrayed, and I have some empathy with that. But 100 years is a very long time, and one can't say that they didn't get quite a lot in their own way from the British connection.
Okay, from Sparky Super Chat, Junkers sad, loses favorite drinking buddies. We'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there.
All right. From Atnosens, Super Chat, just to say hi. Great talk, illuminating. Thank you for that Super Chat. From Svatinek, Super Chat, is there a Russian collusion on Brexit? Smiley emoji there too.
Of course there is. I mean, Putin controls everything. You see, I mean, Juncker,
Senator
Macron,
Mitchell, Senator George Mitchell.
Someone said that in the chat too.
Yeah,
Senator George Mitchell.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
But as I said, they're all busy phoning up the puppet master in the Kremlin and getting his orders. I mean, that goes without saying. That's why Angela Merkel is so.
You see, we can make light of it and laugh at it, as we should here. But doesn't it really tell you the structural weakness of Western political establishments, that they have to find some outsider to take blame for the problems that they created in the first place? That's what the Russian boogeyman is all about. It's about the weaknesses that are on display that they have created themselves. Okay?
Well, indeed,
it's really pathetic. Okay?
Well, indeed. So, and can I just actually say something about this? I mean, we're now being completely serious about this. One of the most remarkable revelations for me that came out of the Russiagate thing over the last couple of weeks, it's not been widely noticed, is that there was this meeting between Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director, and the deputy director of MI5, that's the British counterintelligence agency. And the two of them agreed, apparently, that, the fact that the Brexit referendum resulted in a vote for Brexit, and that Donald Trump won the election in the United States were connected things. And both of them showed how they'd underestimated Russian influence. At that level, at the level of the spooks, it seems that they really believe it. I mean, they really believe, apparently, the people in, Grantham, which is the town where my wife comes from, were voting for Brexit because Vladimir Putin's Facebook campaign, and because he was funding this millionaire Aaron Banks. Turned out, by the way, he wasn't. I mean, Aaron Banks has been a much misunderstood and misrepresented man. He funded himself. He had no connection with Russian money. But, I mean, at that level, they really believed it. Shows how profoundly paranoid they've become.
Yeah, and you know what they're doing? They're destroying the political culture that they have found themselves at the highest levels of. I mean, you have to blame themselves. I mean, again, this is this ideological obsession and possession that people have. No, we can't be making any mistakes. It's the people that are making the mistake. They're so weak. They're so impressionable. This is all nonsense. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, there's a good article by Caitlin Johnston today, actually.
Yeah,
which
it
has
was
the
on
title.
Zero Hedge.
Everyone today is a Kremlin stooge.
Yeah,
You can see it on Zero
Troll,
Hedge.
something like that. Yeah, you can find it on Zero
saw
Hedge.
it
Actually, we posted on the Duran as well. It's a
Yeah.
good article. Check it out. She makes good points. From Sparky Super Chat, Boris broke it off in both Ramoners and Brexiteers.
Well, yes, I mean, he hasn't given either side what they wanted. The Ramoners, as I said, are faced with a deal and a very difficult vote tomorrow, which has put them very badly on the spot. And the prospect of a general election, which could result in a conclusive Boris victory, which is something they had not expected at all. And of course, Nigel Farage and the Brexiteers are disappointed because from their point of view, the no-deal Brexit that they were working towards isn't going to happen on the 31st of October. But having said that, I still feel on balance that the people who have lost more and have more reason to be angry as we're speaking are the Ramoners rather than the Farage party and Farage and the Brexit party. They have a potential role in front of them. The Remainers are looking very exposed at the moment.
Okay, super chat from HXCMD88. Transition period, question mark. I want to move to the UK next year.
Well, we still
don't go to Northern Ireland.
Not in Northern Ireland. And we still have quite a few things going for us. I mean, but still, I mean, you know, we're always welcome. We're a friendly country.
Okay, from Sparky super chat. Don't forget lend lease.
Oh, well, indeed. No, we never forget Lend-Lease. Though I would add. I mean,
sorry.
We paid through the nose for Lend-Lease. I mean, we lost all our gold reserves, apparently. I mean, there was a ship that went off to South Africa and piled itself up with gold. And with South Africa being, of course, at that time, a British dominion, and went off to the United States. And so, I mean, you know, we paid for it. And of course, after the Second World War, we had this huge loan that John Maynard Keynes negotiated, which we actually only finally finished repaying a few years ago. And it was really remarkable how little attention the fact got. I mean, this huge loan, which in the early years after the war had weighed very heavily on Britain and its economy. And when we finally finished paying it off, hardly anyone was interested.
Okay, from Lord Brett Sinclair, super chat. The US played virtually no role in World War I, and the Russians won World War II. The Yanks take far too much credit in both.
Well, I wouldn't say that they played no role in World War I. If you look at what happened in 1918, I mean, the arrival of the US troops was very important for many reasons. I mean, there's no question about that. In the Second World War, well, again, the United States played a big role, but of course, the decisive one was played by the Soviet Union. I mean, it was the Soviet Union that broke Nazi Germany, and anybody who argues otherwise is lying.
Okay, and also you have to remember with in 1917, going into 1918, the Germans won on the Eastern Front. The Russian Empire collapsed and was routed militarily, and with the arrival of American troops in the wary Western Front, it made a big difference. It did, okay, because it allowed the Germans to refocus all of their energies on the West. And the United States did play a crucial but very short, and it was a tipping point. Okay, with the Second World War, I would tend to agree with that. However, serious scholars, have looked at the Soviet war effort. 10% of the Soviet war effort was Lend-Lease. And there was actually a joke that Soviet soldiers had. My boss told me this a few months ago, is that spam, American spam tins were ubiquitous. There were so many of them sent to the Soviet Union, so many of them, that anytime a soldier opened it up, they say, I'm opening up the second front. Okay, because they looked at that as part of the second front. Okay, they didn't open up the second front until June 1944, but at least they had some kind of physical evidence that they were trying with the second front. It was with spam. People love spam here. They have good memories of it there. But of course, Alexander Mercouris is right. The overwhelming force to defeat fascism in Europe was the Soviet Union, or I should rather say the soldiers of the Soviet Union.
Right, okay. From Sparky Super Chat, be careful what you wish for, Northern Ireland.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, from Nigel Super Chat, 31st of October, date to live in infamy, question mark. It's my birthday. That's...
Well, it'll be important because it is
before.
your birthday.
Nigel.
It'll be important because it is your birthday.
That's
okay.
right.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean,
Okay.
we don't know how all of this in the end is going to play out. I mean, I am pretty sure that what I said about Ireland is now basically the trajectory that's going to be followed. But as I said, how it's going to work out with Britain and the EU, well, there's still, unfortunately, an awful lot of unknowns.
Yeah, well, we now talk about the 31st of October. It's not only Halloween. Everyone is talking about it as Brexit Day as well. So
Well, indeed.
Nigel is right. It is a day of infamy.
Yeah.
From James Roche, Super Chat, assuming the agreement passes, how do you think the UDA/UDF react?
Well, that's a very good question. These are the Protestant paramilitary groups, or militias, if you prefer, in Northern Ireland. I think they will be very upset and very angry. But at the same time, and this is the overwhelming feeling I got when I was in Northern Ireland, I don't think there's any desire on anybody's part in Northern Ireland. Well, not anybody's, there are some people, but the vast majority of people, including the vast majority of people in the paramilitaries, to resume the conflict as it was being fought in the 70s and 80s. So I think that we will still see peace in Northern Ireland, but I don't think these people will take up arms. And who are they going to take up arms against? I mean, are they going to fight the British?
All right. From Indigo Jones, could Brexit end up like the 100-year Irish transition?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes, it could, depending very much on what kind of government negotiates this transition arrangement. Now, as I said, I come back to what I said. In my opinion, we shouldn't have been looking at any kind of transition or talk of transition at all. It's very strange to me how we got into the situation in 2016 so quickly, where it was the purpose of the 2-year period after Article 50 was so quickly lost sight of. But Theresa May came in. She never really believed in Brexit. I think that's pretty obvious. And the Leave Party, the Leavers, within the Conservative Party didn't organise.
Okay, from Harry C. Smith, Super Chat. I just learned that everyone born on the island of Ireland is entitled to an Irish passport, i.e. all Northern Ireland folk are automatically EU citizens by birth. That's a factor I've never heard anyone consider regarding Brexit. Well,
I mean, I must admit, I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me because, of course, Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, has never really accepted Northern Ireland as a separate, as outside the Irish Republic. I mean, that has never been its view. I mean, I should say there was a brief civil war after Irish independence in 1922-23 over this issue, because of course a lot of people in Southern Ireland felt very angry with the deal that had been negotiated with the British, which led to this partition and to the loss of the 6 counties in the north. But eventually, when the Irish government, the Irish Republican government, consolidated itself, especially after Eamon de Valera, who was the leader of the Irish nationalist movement, became president, they made absolutely clear that they didn't really accept the fact that Northern Ireland was independent of the Republic of Ireland, or separate rather from the Republic of Ireland at all. So it's completely logical that they should be prepared to give people north of the border Irish citizenship.
Okay, from Sparky. Irish in the US after Ireland's independence in the 1920s proudly put their country of origin on the next census as the Free Irish State.
Well, there we are, because of course, I mean, the story of the Irish struggle to achieve independence from Britain is an immense one. I mean, it goes back hundreds of years. I mean, I'm not going to rehearse it now. And of course, many Irish people, north and south, feel that it will not be over until a united Ireland is achieved.
And Boris is going to deliver.
Well,
yeah. No. Oddly enough, Sparky super chat. Reagan forgave that loan. Talking about
right. Okay, this is a complicated story. There are lots of different loans. The one that Keynes negotiated, the famous one, or it was famous in its day. As I said, the British only recently repaid. So,
well, the real story is that John Maynard Keynes was shocked that the U.S. would be so stingy.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, basically, he went to Washington with the assumption that there would be a sweetheart loan.
Exactly.
And Truman said, no way. And it's very interesting. You have to, from the American perspective. Remember, during the Second World War, Roosevelt refused ever to go to London, ever. Yeah. And if you look at the minutes of his meetings, I mean, he was staunchly against the British Empire.
Yes.
He really was. Okay.
Yes.
And the Four Freedoms, Churchill wanted to make sure it didn't apply to the dominions and the colonies. I mean, and that's why it was left oblique. Okay, because FDR was adamant that the United States is not going to go to war against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan to save the British Empire. No way. And he was emphatic about that.
Yes. And I would add that the story of the great friendship between Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill is very largely myth. It was a myth that Churchill himself largely created, especially in his memoirs. The two were never particularly friendly with each other, and there was always this difference between them.
Okay, and that's why that's why he would send Harry Hopkins so often. Yes. Because when he would go visit Churchill, he always made sure that Harry Hopkins went to go see Stalin also. Okay. And so, Alexander McCurris is right. This is more kind of Hollywood-esque imagery here. Obviously, the United States saw an interest in defeating Nazi fascism in the world, obviously for ideological reasons.
Yes.
And also this was, the inevitable rise of American hegemony. Okay, and it would be Britain that would be the second string to American designs for the global order. But repeatedly, through FDR's papers and all that, he always was very, very angry and very suspicious of Churchill, of always trying to undermine FDR's relationship with Stalin, because Churchill was always putting out landmines, and the Americans knew it. Okay. Yeah. You have to remember that during the course of the war, American attitudes towards the Soviet Union were far different than they would be in the post-war era. Okay. Yeah. The four policemen. I mean, that sounds like a terrible term to use today, but it was a really common coinage in the 1940s as the war was being wound up, that they would have the four policemen, and it wasn't going to be the U.S. and the U.K. No, it was going to be other powers too. It's very idealistic.
Yeah.
Okay, from Atnosen, Super Chat, turn Brexit into an HBO hit and the US wins again.
Well,
it would be a very long running series.
Well, I'll tell you, if it was on Netflix, every white guy would be a psychopath, a drug addict, a wife beater, a sociopath. Netflix, what is going on with you people? My God, this is ideology on steroids. It's sickening.
They're woke. They're woke, Peter. From, from Dan Noya's $10 super chat. I have oft wondered what happened to the British spirit. Amazed that Ramoners advocate for their own enslavement. I thought the UK had transformed itself into Solzhenitsyn's gulag.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I have been very, very bewildered at the length to which some people in Britain have gone to keep Britain within the European Union. I mean, they have done major damage to our constitutional arrangements. And, you know, we've talked about this on other programs. They've deeply polarized the country. They've created a major political crisis. For what cause? To keep Britain in the European Union when most of the British people voted to leave. It's bewildered me, but there we are. It shows the extent to which globalization is an elite phenomenon all over the West.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Fiatinik, $10 Australian super chat.
Yeah.
Controversial, but was Adolf trying to save Europe from communism?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, his own conception maybe, but I mean, the Europe he would have created would have been a hellish one. So anyway.
No, it was an ideology based on racism. It wasn't. No, I don't like that at all. That's revisionist history, and you know. And if you're going to save Europe, why do you enslave it? I'm sorry, I don't get it. And if you look at what Germany did during the war, actually before the war, because they had all of these bilateral economic treaties primarily with Eastern Europe, and it was mercantilism. I mean, it was barter. I mean, they wanted their raw materials, resources. They would give them machinery. Okay. Yeah. And destroying entire ethnic groups in them, and that's not saving Europe, okay? And that's called creating an ethno-state based on racism.
Yes.
Okay. So sorry, I don't buy that. I'm sorry, I'm slightly offended by it too.
I agree.
I don't like this whitewashing of history.
No, I agree.
From Sparky, $2 super chat. Should Parliament convene this Guy Fawkes Day?
Well. That, of course, is after the 31st of October, so it's in November. So maybe it will convene on that day, but hopefully not to discuss Brexit.
Okay, from HT03, $5 super chat. Doesn't Brexit mean England loses Gibraltar too? This is very important to NATO. US will shift attention away from England towards Spain as a result.
Well, the question of Gibraltar was briefly brought up by the Spanish, but it has never really crystallized to anything like the extent.
Nobody wants to die on the hill called Gibraltar.
No, I was going to say. I was going to say. I mean, it's never really been an issue, and I don't think it's going to become an issue now. And I think the British will hold on to Gibraltar for the time being. I mean, I think a point to make about Gibraltar is that it's not divided. It's not a divided society in the way that Northern Ireland is. I mean, in Northern Ireland, something like 45% of the population want to be part of the Irish Republic. And that's been a conflict. In Gibraltar, people overwhelmingly want to remain with, a self-governing territory under British rule. So that already makes a difference.
If it's not broken, why fix it? Okay,
exactly,
and the Spanish have lived with it for a long time. They can say they have dominion over it, and that's fine. But reality is different on the ground, and that's living in a world of pretend. And you know what? If it takes living in a pretend world to avoid a conflict, I can live with that, and so can the people of Gibraltar and the Spaniards.
Okay, the final super chat, and we'll wrap it up here from Stuart Walker. I am Irish by birth. Most of the Irish public do not want to be in the EU. On the ground reporting is so much more relevant.
Well,
I've been told otherwise. I'm sorry, I've been told otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to Northern Ireland, my sense was that most people did want to be in the EU, and of course, the city one city I stayed with, which was Derry, I think it was almost the highest percentage of people voted to stay in the EU. Because Derry is on the border. It's on the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. I think the question of whether or not Ireland wants to remain within the EU is a matter that the Irish people will themselves have to sort out in due course. At the moment, as I said, the trajectory is for Irish unification to happen fairly soon. Boris Johnson has given it a huge push. Psychologically, an important barrier has been crossed. A Conservative Prime Minister, supported by the Conservative Party, is prepared to create division between Britain and Northern Ireland in a way that nobody ever imagined he would do. And I think Ireland being in the European Union, for the moment at least, facilitates that process. A united Ireland may feel differently.
This is a classic example of the Overton window.
Yeah.
Okay, Boris Johnson has said something that was thought unthinkable, unspeakable, and now the Overton window has been opened. Wider.
You put it exactly right, Peter. That's exactly what it is.
It's a great way to end this live stream on Brexit. All right, guys, tomorrow we have the vote, correct, Alexander? So outside of that, Peter, what are you looking at over the weekend?
I have a very good friend of mine, Nikolai Petro from the University of Rhode Island. He makes periodic visits to Moscow, and he'll be on my crosstalk program on Sunday. Our recording will be on air on Monday, and we'll do Ukraine.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say, a brilliant academic and writer. Everything he writes on Ukraine and indeed on Russia is mandatory reading for anybody who wants to understand either country. So good for you, Peter.
And Alexander McCurris will be on my program on Tuesday. It will air on Wednesday, and we will do Brexit. And maybe I'll just introduce Alexander McCurris and then let him run the program for me, okay?
Well, hardly. But seriously, I mean, obviously we've got to follow Brexit and all the permutations. I mean, I have to say, I think in some shape or form, we are now close to entering the end game. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but we are closing in on it. But we've
outside of Brexit, Alexander,
with the rest of
tick.
Yes, the rest of the world does continue. Syria is huge. The Arab world is huge. Russiagate is huge.
Shifty Schiff.
Yeah, Shifty Schiff. We've also got apparently the Michael Horowitz report. We've been hearing rumors that it's about to come out very soon. So lots going on in the world.
Don't forget what's going on in Spain, guys.
Well, indeed.
Well, and what's going on in Beirut and Lebanon right now?
Well,
a lot of riots. So we got our plate full, and we're gonna cover it all.
Indeed,
we'll cover it all.
Indeed, we will.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this live stream. If you haven't hit that like, hit that like. If you haven't shared the channel, share the channel. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Yeah. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk in Moscow. Thank you very much, Peter. And Alexander Mercuris, the Oracle of London, stationed in, where else? London.
Well, London, yeah.
All right.
In the eye of the hurricane.
In the eye of the hurricane. And what time is the vote tomorrow?
I'm not absolutely sure. I'm guessing the mid-afternoon.
Okay, great. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this live stream. We hope you have a really good weekend wherever you are in the world. Take care, everybody.